What if miracles could be part of our everyday reality? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is quantum optimist Cynthia Sue Larson. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, my very special time of the show is when I bring on a great guest. And my great guest today, her name is Cynthia Sue Larson, and we're going to talk about the Mandela effect and quantum jumps and reality shifting and quantum paradigms. And I got to tell you, what some people call impossible is just the stuff they haven't seen. We have more power over our reality than we've been taught. And today we're going to talk about personal power, how to become more conscious of the effect of our thoughts, feelings, beliefs have on the universe, the fact that we can transform our lives through our thoughts and feelings and the underlying connectedness between space and time. Bottom line, miracles are normal. They're part of our everyday life if we are open to the possibilities. It's kind of like, the world is full of miracles, and it's a lot more fluid and dynamic than we think it is. And Cynthia is going to teach us all about it and teach us some ways in which we can take advantage of that fact. So Cynthia Sue Larson is a best-selling author of books including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. She's the founder of Reality Shifters, president of the International Mandela Effect Conference, managing director of Foundations of Mind, and creator and host of The Quantum Dream. She's been featured in a number of shows on Gaia, the History Channel, Coast to Coast, all over the place. And she always reminds us to ask the question, how good can it get? So welcome to Guys Radio, Cynthia Sue Larson.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert. I love being with you today.
Thank you. Me too. When you talk about reality shifts, what exactly do you mean? Is that observing the universe changing its mind?
Well, I think of it as more like our experience of consciousness in action, that we're witnessing things appear, disappear, transform, transport, changes in the way we experience time. And this is all part of our normal daily experience that often goes unexamined. These kind of miracles are happening all around us, and they're natural, quite natural.
So are we only viewing a limited slice of the reality because we only see what's in front of us that we can kind of comprehend and process? But does reality shift based on what we then are paying attention to? Does that make sense?
Love that question. Yeah, it totally makes sense. When you think about each of our ranges of perception, for example, visual perception, we're familiar with a rainbow. That's our entire span of visible spectrum. We can only see red through violet with the naked eye. We have to go to equipment in order to see infrared or ultraviolet. Similarly, we've got limitations in our bandwidth of hearing, and that's another frequency wave bandwidth. And pretty much all of our senses are compressed little slices of reality. They're not the whole thing. And perhaps more shocking, they're just representations of, they're not even truly expressing what's out there. They're just our reinterpretation of what's there. So the whole thing is kind of interpretation of a thin slice, very thin slice of reality.
So we are only then similar to eyesight, where they say we're only processing like 1%. Our interpretation of reality that's in front of us is also very limited unless we open ourselves up to the possibility that there could be a lot more, and it could be a lot more fun if we do that. Is that the case?
Right. Gosh, yes. And we tend to get lost with tunnel vision in our own lives. We don't see who we are. We get wrapped up in the drama of living. So that means we're not really observing. We start believing that we are the character that we're playing. But actually, these reality shifts invite us to view ourselves from a higher dimensional standpoint, that we can see ourselves as an observer and the actor in our lives. We're both. So we're not just a little pawn or something getting tossed around by whatever's happening, whatever drama might be unfolding. Drama meaning when people try to get you to get roped into something you should be angry about, or you should be worried about, or frightened about, or sad about. And not necessarily. It's actually a higher level of awareness to get into that observer role, meditate, and see things from that little slightly higher level of perspective.
So when we do that, how do we, let's bring the concept of shifting reality into that. So if you we're doing the work to raise your vibration, you meditate, you eat the right foods, you get enough rest, you hydrate, all that kind of stuff. How can we, from a practical standpoint, how can people then take more of the steering wheel, if you will, in creating our reality?
Well, it starts from within. So I would recommend don't create anything until you're calm and you're in that beautiful, neutral, accepting state of balance. Because if you're not balanced, and whatever you create will be a little bit of a whirlwind, a little bit of a storm, a little bit of a crash and burn. And I think that a lot of people go through that without knowing they're doing that. And so it's really important to kind of get to that place of where you're neutral in the sense that you're very accepting. You can start seeing a silver lining in everything, no matter what it is, no matter, even if someone says, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I would recommend keep looking at how good can it get? How good is it? And look for that silver lining because it is there, I promise you. And when you find it, then you can start getting to that balanced place. From there, finally, then I would say go for it. Then you can create. The reason I don't recommend manifesting from all this drama or the chaos is it creates tangled results.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about before we got on the air, I was ill for a couple of days at the end of last week, and it was brutal and just stomach virus type of thing that we've all had, even though nobody talks about any other illnesses right now, but people do still, they get stomach aches and they eat the wrong food, whatever. I was very sick, and it was the third person in my family who got this. And as I was going through a very tough night, something came over me and said, we're helping you purge what's inside of you, but I saw all of these images, just chaos and all stuff that came from my life, just all over the place. And the message was, you need to clean that up too. So you have a broader perspective and more of an open perspective, and you're not weighed down by all of that chaos. Is that relevant to what we're talking about?
Gosh, yes, that's like the heart and soul of it right there. I couldn't imagine a better way to encapsulate it. And I think people can relate. I don't know if everyone does what you did, but when you get that kind of a message of just let go. I went through COVID and long COVID, and the big message was I'm not going to sound macabre, but it was like, you stress, you die. In other words, don't stress about anything. Like, I don't care if it's like, but I have to pay my taxes. It's like, don't stress. And I can't think clearly because I got brain fog. Don't stress. It's like, whoa, what a revelation. So yeah, I think these illnesses are a gift as well, as you're pointing out. I love the way you described what you went through, because you got to that point of clarity that all that, we don't even notice we're doing it when we carry this clutter around. I'm sure that's true for you, because I think it's true for all of us. Before we know it, we're just carrying baggage, so just heaps and piles of it, of these expectations of what people think, we think that they think we're supposed to be doing. Maybe it's a lot simpler than that.
It's a great point. What I attempted to do since then, I've gone on a 3-day, my wife's been doing it for 7 days because she's a pro at fasting, but I've gone on my first water fast and this is my 4th day, and I'm working through it. So it's all new. Every day is new. But the point is, what I've attempted to do is take something, create something positive out of something negative, and be open and aware to the messaging that I was getting, because I was open to the messaging to do something positive. So what was very, very violently ill evening became something that has put me on a nice path now. So I think that's something for our audience to consider. Like, sometimes when bad things happen, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world now, but we have to look for what is the lesson often, instead of just what it is at that point. Is that true, Cynthia?
Yes, I think looking for a lesson is valuable. Sometimes there are layers of it. They can stair step farther and farther. And often we might feel like we're getting manipulated by our corporate media just to think or believe certain things.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So it's good to rise above that mess and start seeing through it and look to see. I'm not advocating get crazy with it, quite the opposite. I'm just recommending get simple with it. Recognize what is in our best interest in our community and our families, and that's to be heart-based, loving, without all sorts of baggage and get just outraged, that doesn't hold any place in our relationships, regardless what someone decided to do or what their truth might be. These reality shifts invite us to look at subjective realities, that there are truth bubbles, that is natural, and we can be respectful of all of that without getting demanding and judgmental about what should be and all that.
Okay, Guys Radio, my very special guest is Cynthia Sue Larson. We're talking about reality shifts, quantum jumps. We're going to get into quantum paradigms and also the Mandela effect. But to kind of land the helicopter here for our audience, what was your experience that led you to become such a leader, a thought leader in terms of reality shifting and quantum thinking?
Just sticking with it. Because I've got a passion that's just unquenchable for the topic. And I started in the 1990s writing about it with my website and doing radio interviews and going to events and talking about it with everybody I could find. So just sticking with it, really, just be there, keep showing up every day, have that be my passion, which it is. And that's how that happens. It's not really magic. It's just chop wood, carry water.
Now, have you been from other thought leaders in the metaphysical area, have you been challenged on any of your hypotheses?
No, because, well, I mean, skeptics will sometimes challenge. I'll get emails from people who say, you're misrepresenting physics. You call yourself a physicist. How dare you say that these kinds of quantum jumps are occurring when you're misusing the terminology? And so I'll engage in a back and forth. And what I find is when I'm respectful with people, no matter how angry they might be, they come around to recognizing, well, you seem very nice, you're very respectful. And so, but I feel like it's more important to talk person by person with people and show them that even with something like a quantum jump, yes, I really do mean that we are seeing it in our macroscopic world, and that is part of the definition. And I'll show them that with some of the studies that took place that I mentioned in my book, Quantum Jumps, for example. And it's not a matter of facts usually. Usually what happens is people have a bias, just like what we were talking about, like what you're going through with your insight. I love your flash of insight just coming from like, gotta let go of this stuff. Yeah, when our heads are so full of what we think we know, there's not much room for anything more. So usually it helps to listen to someone who is just so full. And then when they start like offloading some of that, like, oh, okay, so you do hear what I'm saying. Like, yeah, I do hear what you're saying. And then there's room for them to receive a bit.
In your life, Cynthia, you've had a lot of instances where quantum jumps and reality shifts have occurred. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Gosh, yes. Well, everything from the mundane that everybody experiences, where I've set my keys down just before going somewhere, and then they're not where I put them, and nobody messed with them, nobody moved them. They're just not there. And then I have to search the whole house. And then at some random moment, there they are, where I had looked for them several times, not just the first time. And nobody moved them. And that was that's an example of appearing, disappearing.
And what is that? Because everybody's had that. I've had that, the exact example of that, where I came back and found my keys after looking over and over and over for them. They were right in the middle of the table. There's no way I missed them. What happened?
Right. Well, there are lots of explanations for what causes these reality shifts. Now they're called personal Mandela effects. That seems like the lexicon of our day. That's what people talk about now. But I'd like to give credit to Mary Rose Barrington, who was tracking this in England. She was very respected and working with colleges where you can actually do parapsychology and metaphysics and be respected in the United Kingdom. So Mary Rose Barrington called it just one of those things. And JOTT, she called it jot and jottles. And she was tracking documented cases going back to the early 1900s. So it goes back a long time. I think that's important because it shows that we've got a very documented history from reputable scientific sources that show that this has been going on, even though you and I and everybody has this happened to them. It usually, prior to discussing the subject seriously, gets dismissed as like a memory lapse or confusion. And so I've been really making I drew a line in the sand and said, okay, everybody, this is real. I like to look at it as a quantum phenomenon. I see it as part of quantum paradigm operating in our everyday reality. I believe that we're witnessing that, and it makes sense to me that way. It's not a full explanation because we don't yet have a agreed upon quantum interpretation. We haven't yet decided, is this a holographic multiverse or is this a simulation? There's a lot of discussion still about how to interpret quantum physics. So that's why it's not a complete explanation, but it's fascinating. And to me, it seems like a good fit.
It's interesting that just as an example of, again, with the finding the lost keys, but it's all about, in a number of ways, what you're willing to accept as possibilities. So for instance, you mentioned in the book, Captain Cook, when he sailed, and he was a real guy, when he sailed to Tahiti, the natives there did not see his boat, his ship, because they'd never seen that type of ship, I guess. I'm sure they've seen some longboats or whatever, but they didn't see a big ship with sails or anything on that. How did that work? How did you find out about that? That's cool.
Well, I was just fascinated by that description in historical records. I do look through historical records to see what we can find in terms of how to show these things that are now appearing in laboratory experiments. This is very similar to an experiment conducted back in 2018 that was reported in 2019 about double slit experiment with 2 observers in the same place, same time, witnessing 2 different things and their trusted experimental devices. That's very relevant because that shows that we can be in these bubbles of subjective reality. Well, how do I explain it? That I would say the natives are likely so entangled with their ocean, their water, the animals, the plants, that to them, that entanglement is having what we might call a quantum Zeno effect, where you kind of lock a quantum system into a quantum state. So those natives, by virtue of being so in tune with their surroundings, they see it the way they would love to see it, which is naturally without any visitors. They're not looking for something that they've never seen before. And so they're actually not seeing it. And this is a very radical way of looking at the world, but this is the way that I look at the world. And then from the standpoint of Captain Cook's crew, and of course officers and himself, they know that they're there, so they don't understand how could they not be seen. But when there's something so novel and something so new, to me it makes sense from that experiment that we've seen recently, just in the last few years. Obviously, it's possible for 2 people to be standing side by side and witnessing 2 different realities unfolding. And I think some of us know that we've seen that with friends that we trust, where we'll have an argument like what happened or didn't happen. And if that's ever happened to you and you feel like, but my friend never lies, I don't get it. I'm just putting out there, consider another possibility. Maybe you're both right.
Mm-hmm. Very fascinating. So what are some examples of in our day-to-day lives? I know there's the finding the keys that we touched on a few times, but beyond that, what should people be aware of? How can they make themselves more aware of the possibilities? Because it seems like that's what it's really all about. When you have a very narrow frame of thinking, you're going to get what you're narrowly framed on. But if you have an open mind and you're open to possibilities, more things will become available to you. Is that correct?
Yes, it's absolutely true. And this is what we see with reality shifts having a similarity to the placebo effect, in a sense that you can recognize. I talk about in my book, Reality Shifts, people that became instantly well. There can be healing, just instantaneous healing can occur. And I did a workshop in Long Island for a group of people that had been through devastating results from Katrina. So they were just reeling with that whole experience. And I was doing a workshop, and one of the participants subsequently told me that he'd been dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and he was wondering in the workshop, what advice could I give him? And I said, well, just literally jump when you're in the elevator, when you're going to go see your doctor and you want to jump into a new reality, do that physical thing and just tell yourself. And he's been a lifelong meditator. He was quite gifted at manifesting, law of attraction, all that good stuff. So he said, he said, Cynthia, you won't believe what happened. I was jumping in the elevator, going for the next checkup, and expecting that the cancer had progressed or had stayed, the same. Instead, they found it was gone, and this is the kind of thing that's possible. So it starts with things like lost socks and missing keys, and ends up where you can literally jump into realities where that person that was going to sue you, the legal action just fizzles out. A diagnosis that gave you 3 months to live turns into nothing, some sort of mistake, which they can't even believe. But they took all these tests. How can it be completely gone? Well, this is what happens. Yeah.
I have a quick story on that. I had a kidney stone about 7 years ago, and they were going to go up inside me to go grab it. And they showed it to me on the ultrasound, and it was extremely painful. And it actually was here's a gift. I found out that I had a growth on each kidney, and that's a completely other story. But everything's great now. But anyhow, they said we want to grab that kidney stone, so they went up there. They put me under. They went up there. I said, I don't want a stent. And they said, okay, we'll see what we can do. They went up there. I came out of it, and they said there was no stone.
Love it.
They said, you got to go play lotto. And I said, what do you mean there was what do you mean there was no stone? You showed it to me on the ultrasound. And when they went and did the procedure, not there. I
Right.
just figured that's a gift. I just run with it. So
Oh,
I
that's
guess
beautiful.
these things happen to all of us, but I guess it's about being open to what could be. What are the possibilities? How could, as you say, how could can it get?
Yes, how good can it get? That's so important because often if we keep thinking of what next, and we're kind of aiming down, down, down into it, like it's like dive. You don't want to do that. Let's not live our lives that way.
Mhm.
So we can totally pull out of the tailspin and pull up just by asking how good can it get, no matter what's happening, even when it looks impossible, even if it sounds sarcastic. Like, how can I say this when things are so screwed up? Ask it anyway. How good can it get?
Mhm. Oh, I love it. Parallel universes and different timelines. These are concepts that people are talking about now, and a lot of folks don't really grasp it. I don't, but I, work with it. So, could you help us out with kind of those concepts and how they intersect with our day-to-day lives? Parallel universes and different timelines.
Okay. One simple way to look at it is that when we make a decision, whatever the choice may be, like should you go out with friends to lunch or stay home and do some housework and some work that you need to do. Every decision point like that is a branching point. But you can think of it as there is an invitation to go into a couple of different parallel realities. They both exist. And if you imagine it, you can sort of feel it like you can witness it like movie reels. I write about this in a young adult novel, Karen Kimball and the Dreamweaver's Web, showing just for children, like that's what it looks like. You can just see all these different movie reels of this is all the different things that could be happening. And it's kind of cool because when you think of it that way, then you recognize that you can intuitively feel into the future and get a sense of what this will be like. I was doing this a lot when I was a small child, and my parents would ask me any question of any choice, and they just were so frustrated because I'd always say, "Well," because I'm just running with it, like, "Whoa, look at all those." Like if we go to the zoo, it's this. If we go to the store, it's that. And so if you start playing with that, you can improve your intuition because you can start playing with what am I sensing? And okay, I'm going to choose. It's like running a maze. Like, okay, I'll choose this path. Let's see if my vibe and my feeling, my gut feeling turns out to be true. Let's see what happens with door number 2 or door
Yeah,
number 3.
go ahead.
And sometimes it gets fun with reality shifting. This is where it really gets interesting because you can jump from one time. We call it maybe a timeline to another. To me, they're time curves. They're not lines. They're not linear. Time does weird, twisty stuff. But if you jump from one, I'll just call it a timeline to another, then you can jump from waking up feeling like I only got 7 hours sleep. I needed 8 or 9. I'm shortchanged. And just tell yourself, no, I got enough sleep. Just jump to telling yourself, I'm fine. And do that with any situation. So if it feels like this doesn't feel, it seems like I'm shortchanged or I'm less than for some reason, just tell yourself, no, this is great. I'm great. And this is exactly perfect for the situation. So it's working with our belief system because that's often where we subterfuge ourselves. We collapse our own um,
So
good energy.
if somebody's, let's take it in one level deeper. Somebody's going for a job interview or they have an important interview. What should their mindset be going into that to create the type of result that they're hopeful for?
Well, if that's a job they want, then I would say act as if you already have it and allow yourself to relax. Usually, our autonomic nervous system is all in fight or flight in a new situation. We're feeling stressed. But you can do things beforehand that are proven to give you positive energy and reduce the stress and increase the good stuff, like stretch your arms out wide or up above your arms, even if you just do that for a few minutes. It's for a few seconds even. Take a deep breath, relax. Imagine that the person interviewing you is your best friend, that you guys go to lunch all the time. Do stuff like that, and it's actually palpable. The people talking to you will feel it too. And then you get into this whole different vibe. It went from something that was scary to something like, and tell yourself it doesn't matter. Because if you're getting like all tense, like, oh, this is everything. This, if I don't get this interview, forget that. Just feel like, it's my best buddy. We go to lunch all the time. I'm just going to have fun talking about stuff I love. Then you're relaxed. You're already accessing this possible reality where this is true. Everybody in that you're talking to can feel it, and that vibe transmits everywhere. It's got this epic field effect. It just goes to all the connections, all the other people that are decision makers that aren't even in that room, that you didn't even meet. They're also feeling it.
That's fantastic. Okay, Cynthia Sue Larson, my special guest on Guys Radio. We talk about the Mandela effect now. It seems to be a concept that everybody's somewhat familiar with, but what is it and how did it get started and why is it on the tip of everybody's tongue these days?
Well, what it is, it's named after Nelson Mandela, and the fact that some people, I would give credit to Art Bell, because he on his Coast to Coast radio show was talking about how he was inundated with faxes and phone calls and that kind of thing. Lots of messages from people all around the world saying that they remembered that Nelson Mandela had died while he was incarcerated at Robbins Island in jail. And so it was shocking to a lot of people when they saw, wow, wait a minute, he's alive again. And now he's running South Africa. What happened? And does anybody else think this is kind of weird? And so then a blogger named Fiona Broom picked up that thread. Maybe she's heard the Art Bell show, I don't know. But around 2009, 2010, that phrase Mandela effect became a thing. And at that time, Art Bell had asked me, would you call it that? And I said, not really, I wouldn't call it that, because why anchor this whole reality shift phenomenon on a single person? I'd already talked about someone else, in fact, Larry Hagman. So, I didn't say I wasn't that cheeky to tell Art Bell it should be the Hagman effect.
Let's talk about Larry Hagman for a moment, because that's what you and I connected with that, because as I was reading your correspondence, I mentioned, hey, I remember Larry Hagman, and I did not know that that was one of your discoveries. I saw Larry Hagman at the Windows of the World way back in my advertising career before the World Trade Center went away, and he was having a great time there. And then a couple of years later, I read that he had passed. And I'm like, oh, wow, Larry Hagman. I thought he was looking pretty good. And then a couple of years later, I'm like, Larry Hagman starring in some new series or something where there was no way he had passed. He was alive. And I mentioned that to some other people. They had no idea. And then I just forgot about it until you and I connected just a few weeks ago. So what is it with Larry Hagman?
Well, this is just a common example of a celebrity. Now it's becoming a big thing. There are whole Mandela effect websites. I don't see Larry Hagman mentioned. You get a high five and a gold star for being one of the first people to notice this phenomenon. Before there was Nelson Mandela, yes, there was Larry Hagman from I Dream of Jeannie. I used to watch that. And then, of course, he was J.R. Ewing in Dallas. He was a big name in the acting world. And I remember he'd gone in for he'd had some I don't know if it was a surgical problem, and then he died in the operation. But then next thing I was also surprised, like, wow, he's fine. He didn't die. Why did people say he died? Why did they do the funerals and all that? It was very disconcerting, to say the least. To the point that I put it in the book Reality Shift. So it is the first example of the Mandela effect with Larry Hagman. But I'm fine with it being the Mandela effect, and it is affecting a lot of people. It's a huge phenomenon, growing all the time. I tend to call it reality shifts. I tend to call that variation alive again. Again, it's like the two parallel realities, and in one, someone had died. Usually it's a celebrity, not someone close to you, not usually a housemate or someone that you dearly love. Because I do get lots of emails from people saying, my husband or wife or child or you name it, parent has passed on. There was this terrible mistake made. I want to go to that reality where the mistake did not happen. I want my life back and my loved one back. And what I'm actually noticing is that typically what happens is it's not someone that close to us. I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's possible for Zen meditators and people that can get that detached. But for most of us, we're going to see people on a peripheral vision, Larry Hagman's, Nelson Mandela. And if you lived in South Africa, then Nelson Mandela is typically not a reality shift or Mandela effect for you because of the quantum Zeno effect. You're entangled in that truth bubble, that reality bubble, where we never lost Nelson Mandela. We needed him, so he never died in jail. Only lots of the rest of the world did that happen to.
Amazing. 0 point energy. We talk about everything as energy, and we work with energy, and it's pliable. But what is 0 point energy, and why is it important?
Well, I think of it in terms of zero entropy, and I think it's important because of our understanding of time and progress, and pretty much everything that humans, all of our mental map has to do with time, just like it does with space. We have a difficulty envisioning things outside of time. But when we think about source or the creator or God or the Big Bang, or where does everything come from? What was there before there was everything? It's very intertwined with this concept of zero entropy. And I love this book by Carlo Rovelli, the physicist, who talks about this. And I want to give credit to him because he's talking about it's not so much an energy shortage when you want to make a quantum jump, or if you feel like fuel prices are rising too high. He said it's never an energy shortage. We draw that strength. What we think of as energy, it's actually entropy, and we get it from a zero state. So he's basically giving credit to, if you're spiritual, he's saying, it's from source. And if you believe in energy alternatives, then it's 0 point energy, which means that it does exist this source that's available to all of us of just infinite. It's not quite energy. I would agree with Carlo Rovelli, but it's something that we can draw from. So when you go back to something that's unchanging, and that's why people say the creator or God or source, it's pure love, and it's unchanging, and it's eternal, and it's infinite, all that good stuff. That is what zero entropy feels like. And I keep making a pinnacle because it's also where all of the perennial philosophies converge, which Leibniz, the philosopher and one of the two creators of calculus, he talked about this perennial philosophy. And then it was expounded upon later and developed further. But basically, all roads lead to zero entropy. And it gets back into that sense of who is the observer. And we're going full circle through all these amazing topics today, but they're very intertwined with reality shifts, who we are, how we travel in the form of consciousness, and how we draw strength from source, God, the creator, zero entropy.
It's interesting that kind of who we are. It's important for folks today to everybody's looking for their life path now. And you have an exercise in the book, a reality shift exercise about imagining 3 alternative life paths. And I'd love for you to talk about it. I was interviewing Natalie Sudman a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about after she had her near-death experience in Iraq, that the kind of guides that were working with her to repair her body, they would say, oh, if we repair this hand this way, here's a potential life path for you. And if we take out this piece of shrapnel out of your head here or leave it in, it's 2 different life paths you may have. So how does that intersect with how we can develop our own? Is it all in the same kind of a stream, if you will, the same field in terms of developing our own potential life paths? And you mentioned some exercises to see if we can develop those on our own. Forgive me if I did not articulate that correctly, but.
Oh, it's fascinating. I love the example that, and someone who is in that state, like you recently had a health issue. I think health issues tend to bring us to an observer state of mind much more readily than we typically have.
It's like, if I do this, this will happen. If I do this, that'll happen.
Right. And so if you have the blessing of attaining that kind of awareness, then I would trust that kind of intuition. I think a lot of people don't have that because most of the time we're not in that kind of a health crisis. So we'd like to see those life paths, but we don't want the health crisis that might precipitate it, And So of course, so if you want to do that, then this is where an exercise like the one in reality shifts would come in handy, and you can start envisioning for yourself, what would these different possible paths look like for me? And if I like looking at a few of them, because then you can usually find your top three. You might think you've got dozens, but if you kind of like, if you recognize some of them have similar themes, and then you can group those together. And if for people that feel like I don't have much choice, it helps you to start expanding that more than just one or two paths. You can look at three and recognize that there are lots of possibilities for you in every moment. And it's beautiful exercise, because it starts giving us that gift again of recognizing that we can be the observer and the actor in our lives. Often, if we don't become that observer fully, then we can feel trapped. We can feel like we have no choice. It's like tunnel vision collapses and we lose our will to live, and we're just trudging along like on autopilot. That's no good. So it's very valuable instead to let yourself imagine, like being a kid again. I think when we're kids, we know how to do this, because sometimes when adults grow up, they forget, like, what was it like when you said, I want to be a fireman when I grow up? No, wait. I want to be an astronaut. No, wait. I want to be president, And that's the kind of adventurous feeling that you want to have when you're looking at these life paths. You want to get into that sense of joy, and without prejudging it or thinking that, like, I don't want that one. Well, don't, you want to keep it wide open, let it call to you, and you're always going to get what you need. So whichever path you choose, I think that was interesting with the shrapnel in the head and everything. It's very interesting, because when you start getting that level of detail, that's super cool. But most of us don't have access to it because we're not in that, that it's like an altered state due to a crisis that requires that level of attention. Most of us have everything wide open, so it's almost too many choices.
Well, it's interesting because she had this near-death experience, and I had a reading with her, and I mentioned, oh, what if I lived here or lived there? And the way she worked was, I'm sure Natalie will support this, she gave me some insights into, well, if you were here, this could be dynamic, or if you're here, it might take you a little longer to make friends or whatever. And I realized after then reading her book and interviewing her, that it was all about these potential timelines.
Yes.
And that's
exactly.
Right.
And when I work with clients, they often ask, well, what should I do? Most of my clients don't do that because they're practitioners themselves. I tend to get people who are already doing this kind of thing. So, but when I started, I did get people saying, like, what should I do? And it's like what you're saying. It's like, well, it depends on what you're looking for. Because with each of these reality paths, as you say, they come with probabilities. They're typically not certainties. They're much more kind of, it feels like this. It feels like this is an environment, and this is a setting that's very supportive and conducive to whatever, like intellectual exploration or deep friendships or really fun outings. And that you can feel that with these different places and jobs. Absolutely. That's such a good way to look at it. And people that consult the I Ching as a reference, they're familiar with it because it talks that way. When you get through those 64 hexagrams, it's like they were designed, it's almost a binary system before there was binary code. They built the whole thing on a tortoise shell. And divination systems are fabulous for tapping into this innate wisdom that we all have access to. We've just usually forgotten that we do.
It's amazing stuff. Cynthia Sue Larson, my special guest on Guys Radio. So what's next for you, Cynthia?
Well, I'm doing these monthly events with IMEC, the International Mandela Effect Conference, and we are talking about lots of topics related to the Mandela Effect. We're looking basically for a visionary future for all of humanity, recognizing that we can look together collectively for improved timelines, that sometimes there are signs and evidence that indicate, for example, that some long lost species are coming back. Maybe we can ask for some of them to come back. We're witnessing improvements in our bodies, such as the kidneys have moved to a safer location and so forth. So we cover the science of the Mandela effect. We have physicists and experts on our show to interview them and talk about them. We had Roger Marsh talking about his book, Truth Bubbles. And we had, some amazing experts talking about their various theories of physics and reality. So it's just a lot of fun. And we do this once a month, usually toward the end of each month. And it's through our YouTube channel. which is International Mandela Effect Conference on YouTube. And you can
And
sign up to get the newsletter at imec.world, imec.world.
so last question, are you optimistic with all the crazy stuff going on in the world now? I mean, can we shift our reality to make it a better one? Because I have a sense that we were going through the dark part of the dark period, but you have to sometimes, it's like, I got sick last week. Now I'm coming out of it, starting to feel better and better. And I think we may have to go through this vortex a little bit to really get what could be waiting for us. I'm optimistic. How about you, Cynthia Sue?
Always optimistic. Yes, I am. And I see what I see tripping all over my tongue. I guess my frustration is I see people get sucked into the drama. They fall into traps placed often by maybe well-intended public media experts talking about how we should be upset about something. I basically would recommend anytime someone tells you you should be angry or you should be sad or you should be afraid, I would recommend don't, just don't do that, because there's a higher level awareness where you can see above all that drama. And this is not calling it, I'm not naming names. I'm not saying that there's any certain thing going on. I'm just saying that that is the ultimate objective for humanity right now, to rise above the drama, to recognize that we can have a higher level order of perceiving what we are perceiving. And when you do that, there's a level of joy and peace. And so it's not instead of getting sucked deeper down the drain, it's a feeling of accessing the ability to be the fullness of your true spirit. So you could be loving, joyful, supportive, helpful without getting all tangled up, if that makes any sense.
It's beautiful advice. And thank you so much. And thanks for being on Guys Radio. I look forward to us doing it again in the future, and keep doing the work you're doing, because you're really helping humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying the guests and content we bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thank you.